I was on the night shift when the paramedics rushed in with a man in cardiac arrest. Everything moved fast, like it always does. Voices overlapping, people rushing, equipment being prepared. I was just about to get ready to head into surgery when something unexpected happened. A series of bright red messages suddenly flashed in front of my eyes. Don't do it. That man is your husband. I froze. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe it was just stress, but the messages didn't stop. They kept appearing. He was in the woods with another woman. He was bitten by a venomous snake. My heart skipped a beat. That didn't make any sense. I had just spoken to Daniel less than 20 minutes ago. He told me he had just finished running at home and was about to go to bed. So how could he be in the woods? How could he be here? Another message appeared. He's planning to fake his death and run away with her. My fingers tightened slightly. He's going to blame everything on you. A cold feeling spread through my chest. You'll be accused of negligence. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. My breathing became uneven. His new partner is already pregnant. I swallowed hard. Then the final message appeared. Your in-laws are already on their way here, with the police. My face went pale as I stared ahead. Before I could process it, a nurse's urgent voice pulled me back. Dr. Carter, the patient is critical. He's already in the OR. He needs immediate surgery. I didn't move. I had just spoken to my husband. Just 20 minutes ago. He said he was home. So how could he be in the woods, bitten by a snake, and now in cardiac arrest? Just as I was about to head to the OR, more messages appeared. After the surgery, they'll find an empty liquor bottle in your desk. My heart started pounding. Your fingerprints will be on it. Slowly, I turned toward my office. They'll accuse you of operating while intoxicated. My throat tightened. You'll be sentenced to 15 years. A heavy pressure built in my chest. And when you get out, your husband will make sure you don't live long enough to tell the truth. I immediately turned and walked to my desk. I pulled the drawer open. Nothing. It was empty. I stared at it for a second, my thoughts racing. If this was real, then whatever they were planning hadn't happened yet. That meant I still had time. Without hesitation, I turned on my computer and opened the security feed for my office. I adjusted the camera so it had a clear view of my desk, the drawer, everything. If someone tried to put something there, I wanted proof. More messages flickered. You think that will help? It won't. Someone is about to come in and drag you to the OR. Just as the message faded, my office door burst open. Rachel Monroe rushed in and grabbed my arm. What are you doing? He's not going to make it. Her grip was tight. Too tight. The nurses have been calling you. Why aren't you there? I looked at her carefully. Something didn't feel right. She looked anxious. But there was something else beneath it. Something that didn't match the situation. I forced confusion into my expression. What are you talking about? I just spoke to Daniel. He was at home. Rachel paused for a brief second. Then she frowned. Are you serious? He's in the OR right now. I pulled my arm away. Are you sure it's him? Her expression shifted slightly. Of course I am. I narrowed my eyes. Then how do you know he's here before I do? That hit her. I saw it clearly, a flash of panic in her eyes, but she recovered quickly. Your husband is dying, she said, raising her voice. And you're standing here questioning me? Her voice drew attention. Doctors and nurses began gathering nearby. This is your husband, Emily, she continued. And you call yourself a doctor who saves lives? I stayed silent. Because now I was sure of one thing. She needed me in that OR, which meant something was waiting for me there. A young nurse stepped closer and spoke quietly. Dr. Carter? The patient? He has the same name as your husband. Rachel immediately took advantage of that. See? Now do you believe me? What are you waiting for? Go save him. She sounded desperate. But her eyes told a different story. There was something else there. Something like anticipation. I glanced briefly at my computer screen. The camera was still recording. Good. All right, I said. I'll go take a look. When I entered the OR, the atmosphere felt tense. The lead surgeon looked at me urgently. Dr. Carter, the toxin is spreading fast. He's going into shock. At the same time, those messages echoed again in my mind. He took something to fake it. That's why his pulse is weak. I looked at the man on the table. Daniel. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue. For a brief moment, something hit me hard. We met years ago. Fell in love quickly. I did everything I could to make him happy. And now, he was willing to do this to me? I looked at the monitor. The line was almost flat. I pointed at it. We got him too late, I said calmly. There's no point continuing. Prepare to notify the family. The room went silent, but I didn't stay. I turned and walked out. I didn't go back to my office. I went straight to the doctor's lounge. My heart was still racing, but my mind was finally catching up. If this was a setup, there had to be a flaw. There always is. I sat down and forced myself to think. Every detail. Everything that didn't add up. About 30 minutes later, I opened my eyes. This time, I understood. A small, confident smile appeared on my lips. So that's how it is. I picked up my phone and made a couple of quick calls, setting my own plan in motion. If they thought I would walk straight into their trap, they were wrong. I didn't go back to my office. Instead, I headed straight to the doctor's lounge. My heart was still pounding, but my thoughts were starting to settle. If this was a setup, then somewhere in all of it, there had to be a mistake. There always is. I sat down and forced myself to go over everything. The messages, Daniel, Rachel's reaction, the timing. None of it felt random. 30 minutes passed. Then something clicked. My eyes opened slowly. And this time, I wasn't confused anymore. A quiet smile formed on my lips. So, that's it. I grabbed my phone and made 2 quick calls, setting everything into motion. If they wanted to trap me, then I would make sure they walked right into it first. About 10 minutes later, I walked into the main staff lounge. A couple of surgeries had just ended, so the room was busy. Doctors sitting around, nurses coming and going, people waiting for food or just trying to rest. Perfect. Rachel wouldn't try anything too obvious here. I chose a corner seat and waited. It didn't take long. Her voice echoed from the entrance. "Where is Dr. Carter?" Heads turned immediately. She walked in fast, followed by a group of people. Too many people. This wasn't concern. This was a scene. "You let your personal feelings get in the way and watched your own husband die," she said loudly. "Someone like you doesn't deserve to be a doctor." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. I raised an eyebrow slightly. So this was her move, a public accusation. I let out a short breath, almost like a quiet laugh. "I never issued a death certificate," I said calmly. That made her pause for half a second. But she recovered quickly. The people behind her didn't. They moved forward suddenly, too aggressive, too fast. Their focus wasn't on arguing. It was on me, more specifically, my hands. I reacted immediately. I stepped back and positioned myself behind a patient's family member I had called earlier. Right on time. The other doctors in the room noticed instantly. Someone stepped forward. "Who are you people?" one of them said sharply. "This is a staff area. If you cause trouble, we're calling security." Another doctor already had their phone out. Rachel's expression darkened. "What do you mean trouble?" she snapped. "She's the problem. She refused to treat her own husband. She used her position to harm him." Her voice grew louder. "We're here to demand justice." She thought intimidation would make them back off. It didn't. If anything, it had the opposite effect. The more aggressive she became, the more the others stood their ground. I watched her closely. There it was again. That flicker in her eyes. Frustration. This wasn't going exactly how she planned. I crossed my arms slightly. "You're saying I harmed my husband," I said. "What proof do you have?" She let out a cold laugh. "You want proof? Fine." She pulled out a document, a death certificate, so that part was real. I took it from her and looked it over carefully. It didn't take long to see the problem. I pointed at the issuing institution listed on the document. "This doesn't make sense," I said evenly. "The patient was treated in our hospital. The certificate should have been issued here." A few doctors leaned closer, listening now. "And more importantly," I continued, "I wasn't the primary doctor handling the case." That shifted the atmosphere. The doctor who had been leading the emergency treatment stepped forward and grabbed the paper. After a quick look, his face changed. "This is wrong," he said. "There was no delay in treatment. We started immediately." His voice sharpened. "Everything we did is on record. The OR cameras show it clearly." He looked directly at Rachel. "You're lying." For the first time, she didn't react right away, but then she shifted tactics. She pointed at me again. "What about when the nurse called her?" she said. "She refused to come. I went to her office myself. I asked her again and again, and she still wouldn't move." A few people hesitated. That part, they couldn't confirm. After all, a life was involved. Rachel saw it, and she pushed harder. "She let him die," she said, her voice filled with controlled anger. "And now she wants to pretend she did nothing wrong." The room went quiet. No one stepped in this time. No one defended me. I didn't react. "Not yet. Give it a moment," I said calmly. She frowned slightly. Nothing you've said is actual proof. Her expression tightened. The police will be here soon, I added, and when they arrive, I'll request a full investigation. I paused, then looked directly at her. But I do have one question for you. She didn't answer. I held her gaze. How did my husband leave the hospital last night? Before she could respond, a voice came from behind the crowd. I authorized it. The room shifted as two older figures stepped forward, my in-laws, with police officers behind them. The moment my father-in-law saw me, he pulled away from the officer beside him and walked straight toward me. His expression was filled with anger. "Emily," he said sharply, "we treated you like family. And this is how you repay us?" Before I could react, his voice rose. "The reason you didn't go to the surgery is because you were drinking." A wave of murmurs spread through the room. "We tolerated your problem," he continued, his tone heavy, "but we never thought you would ignore Daniel's life." Then he turned to the officers. "I want to report her," he said. "She operated under the influence." He pointed toward my office. "The bottle should still be in her desk." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, my hands clenched tightly. Then slowly, I relaxed, just like I expected. Everything was falling into place. Everyone in the room went silent. Following my father-in-law's accusation, the officers immediately moved. They headed straight toward my office. It didn't take long. Within moments, one of them returned holding a bottle, an empty liquor bottle. The second it appeared, the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. The looks around me changed. From uncertainty, to disappointment, to quiet judgment. The same doctors who had just been standing near me slowly stepped back, creating distance. Rachel couldn't hide her smile this time. "Emily," she said, her tone almost satisfied, "the evidence is right there. What else do you have to say?" I let out a small, quiet laugh. Then I raised my hand slightly and pointed. First at her, then at my father-in-law. "Officers," I said calmly, "I'd like to report both of them for framing me." The room froze. The silence that followed felt heavy. Everyone stared at me. The doctors who had stepped away hesitated. The officers exchanged a quick look. Rachel was the first to react. It took her exactly a few seconds to recover, but I counted them. Those seconds told me everything. "Framing you?" my father-in-law repeated, letting out a short laugh. "Emily, you're a doctor, not a lawyer." His tone was calm again, controlled, but there was something underneath it now. "An empty bottle with your fingerprints," he continued, "and multiple witnesses who saw you refuse to enter the OR. That's more than enough." He turned slightly toward the officers. "You can proceed." Like he was giving an order, but the officer didn't move immediately. Instead, he looked at me. "Dr. Carter," he said, "what evidence are you referring to?" I took a slow breath. "When I'm under pressure," I said quietly, "I don't panic." My voice stayed steady. It's something I learned early on. I looked at him directly. "There are two kinds of evidence." A brief pause. "The kind that proves I did nothing wrong, and the kind that proves someone else did." I took out my phone and opened the hospital's security system. Then I turned the screen toward him. "This is the live feed from my office camera." I tapped the screen. I turned it on before I left, because I suspected something like this might happen. The officer stepped closer. So did his partner. "If you check the recording from last night until now," I continued, "you'll see that my desk drawer stayed empty the entire time." I let that sink in. "Until someone entered my office this morning, while I was somewhere else, surrounded by witnesses." Rachel's voice cut in immediately. "That can be edited," she said. Her tone had changed now. Quieter, more controlled. "Anyone could manipulate a recording like that." I nodded slightly. "That's true." I didn't argue. "That's why I'm not relying on just this." I kept my eyes on her as I spoke. "The hospital system stores all recordings on an external server with encrypted timestamps." I paused just long enough. "The system administrator is already on his way." That wasn't entirely true. I had called him less than an hour ago, but the exact timing didn't matter. What mattered was her reaction. It was small, almost invisible, but I saw it. A slight tightening around her eyes. She didn't know. She hadn't planned for that. My father-in-law, however, didn't react at all, which told me something else. He already knew. He had been part of this much longer. "Miss Monroe," I said, turning to her fully, "what time did you arrive at the hospital last night?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't have to answer that." "Not to me," I said calmly. "To them." I nodded toward the officers. The one holding my phone looked up. "It's a reasonable question," he said. "What time did you arrive?" Rachel hesitated. Around 10, she said finally. I heard about Daniel and came immediately. How did you hear? I got a call. From who? A pause. Too long. A friend. What's her name? Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. I can find it, she said. Do that, the officer replied. We'll need it. I felt something settle inside me, not relief, something sharper, like the moment you realize a situation is turning in your favor because you prepared for it. During those 30 minutes in the lounge, I hadn't just been thinking. I had made 2 calls. The first, to the system administrator. The second, to someone who knew this hospital better than anyone else, Dr. Lisa Bennett. We had trained together years ago. Now she oversaw internal operations, security, access logs, everything. She arrived right on time. The door opened and she walked in calmly, holding a tablet. Emily, she said, ignoring everyone else. I have the access records you asked for. The officers turned immediately. My father-in-law looked at her for the first time, and this time, there was caution in his eyes. Lisa stepped forward and handed the tablet to the lead officer. Access logs to Dr. Carter's office, she said, from last night through this morning. The room went completely quiet. The ID used to access her office this morning, she continued, her voice steady, does not belong to Dr. Carter. A pause. It belongs to Mr. Richard Hayes, my father-in-law. No one moved. No one spoke. Rachel turned toward him, and in that moment, I saw it. Fear. Not fear of the police, not fear of the evidence, fear of him, and that told me something important. She didn't know everything. She was part of the plan, but not all of it. I didn't take my eyes off her, because in that moment, I understood something that changed everything. She wasn't the one in control. She was just another piece, and the real one behind all of this was standing right in front of me. For a moment, no one said anything. The room felt completely still. All eyes shifted between me and my father-in-law. But he didn't react, not immediately. He stood there, posture steady, expression unchanged, like a man who had spent years knowing exactly when to show emotion and when not to. But Rachel, she turned to look at him, and in that brief glance I saw it clearly. Fear, not hesitation, not confusion, fear. Which confirmed everything I had just realized. She didn't know the full plan. She thought she did, but she didn't. And that meant she was expendable. I kept that thought to myself. For now, the officer holding the tablet looked up. Mr. Hayes, he said, we're going to need an explanation. My father-in-law finally moved. Just slightly. Adjusted his posture. Smoothed his sleeve. Small, controlled gestures. I have administrative access, he said calmly. That's not unusual. His tone was steady, confident, but I had spent years reading people in high-pressure situations. I knew what control looked like, and I knew what forced control looked like. There was a difference, and right now, he was forcing it. I stepped forward slightly. Of course, I said. You do have access. I let the words sit for a second. But the question isn't whether you could enter my office. I looked directly at him. It's why you did. Silence again. He didn't answer. Instead, he shifted the focus. Emily, he said, his tone softer now, almost concerned. You've been under a lot of stress. I didn't react. You just lost Daniel, he continued. It's understandable if you're not thinking clearly. There it was. A smooth move, turning my clarity into instability, making it sound like grief. Like I was reacting emotionally instead of logically. I noticed a few people in the room relax slightly, like his explanation made things easier for them. Safer. I didn't let it work. Thank you for your concern, I said calmly, but I'm perfectly capable of understanding what I'm looking at. I turned toward the officers. A few weeks ago, I continued, Mr. Hayes requested access to certain restricted records. My father-in-law's eyes shifted. Just slightly. I saw it. He said it was for internal review, I added, so I approved it. That part was true. I had trusted him, completely. And now, I said, I'd like to know what he did with that access. The officer took a small step forward. Mr. Hayes? For the first time, there was a pause, a real one. Not calculated, not controlled, just a fraction of hesitation. It was enough. I saw Lisa watching him too. She noticed it as well. She always did. I remembered what I told her earlier. Watch his hands. His fingers had tightened slightly, just for a second, but that was all it took. Before he could respond, the door opened again. Another doctor stepped in. Dr. Chen, head of toxicology, one of the most precise people I knew. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it mattered. He walked straight toward me and handed me a folder. No unnecessary words, just quiet confirmation. I opened it. Exactly what I expected, and something I didn't. I scanned the report quickly, then paused. My eyes caught on a specific line. A note, marked clearly. Reversible. My heart skipped. I read it again, just to be sure. Reversible, which meant Daniel wasn't actually dead, or at least, he didn't have to be. For a second, everything else faded. The room, the people, the tension, all of it, because this changed everything. The messages flashed again in my mind. There's still time. There's an antidote. You have a window. I closed the folder slowly, carefully, then looked up again. My expression didn't change, but inside, everything had shifted. This was never about killing me. It was about controlling me. If I had gone into that surgery blindly, if I had followed everything exactly the way they wanted, he would have miraculously survived, and I would have been trapped, blamed, dependent, silenced. I took a slow breath, then turned slightly toward Dr. Chen. I need to speak with you, I said quietly. He nodded once. No questions. That's how he always was. I looked back at the officers. Excuse me, I added. Dr. Bennett can provide anything else you need for now. They nodded, their attention already shifting back to the evidence, to the records, to my father-in-law. That was enough. I stepped out of the room with Dr. Chen. The hallway felt quieter, colder, more controlled. Is there still time? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He thought first, always precise. Barely, he said. But yes, that was all I needed. Then we're not done yet, I replied, and without wasting another second, we started walking. We walked quickly down the hallway. Neither of us spoke at first. There was no need. Dr. Chen already understood the urgency. How long? I asked again, keeping my voice low. If the exposure happened around 10, he said, thinking as he walked, then you still have a few hours, but not much. That matched what I had just read. Not dead, not yet. Just suspended, controlled. I clenched my jaw slightly. Do you have it? I asked. He glanced at me, then reached into his coat. He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. That was enough. We changed direction without slowing down, toward the lower level, toward the place no one questions, the morgue. The hospital had already processed him as a pending death, which meant fewer interruptions, fewer eyes, exactly what I needed. The hallway down there was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier than normal. We entered without turning on the main lights. Only a small overhead lamp flicked on, casting a dim circle over the room. Daniel was there, lying still, pale, unmoving. For a brief second, something inside me tightened. Not grief, not exactly. Something more complicated. I stepped closer, watched carefully. Heart rate? I asked. Extremely low, Dr. Chen replied, already connecting a portable monitor, but still there. A faint line appeared, barely moving, but present, which meant one thing. Everything I suspected was real. This wasn't a random bite, I said quietly. No, he agreed, too controlled. I nodded slightly. Of course it was. Nothing about this had been random. Ready? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at Daniel's face, at the man I thought I knew, at the man who had planned all of this, the late calls, the lies, the calm voice earlier that night, like nothing was wrong, like none of this existed. I felt something twist in my chest. 4 years. 4 years of trust, and this is what it led to. Dr. Chen's voice broke through my thoughts. You need to decide now. He was right. There wasn't time to hesitate. If Daniel died, everything would collapse. But so would the truth. He was the only one who knew the full plan from the inside, the only one who could confirm everything, if he lived. Then I controlled what happened next, and control meant everything. I took a slow breath, then nodded. Yes, I said, we're doing this. He handed me the syringe, already prepared, precise, measured. I didn't hesitate this time. I inserted it into the IV line, pushed the antidote in slowly, then stepped back. We waited. The room was silent again. Except this time, It felt different, not empty. Tense. 30 seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a slight movement. His fingers twitched, barely noticeable. Then again, stronger. Dr. Chen checked the monitor. Response is starting, he said. Another few seconds. Daniel's chest rose deeper this time. Not just reflex. Real breathing. His eyelids shifted slightly. Then opened, slowly. Unfocused at first, then searching. Confused. Alive. Dr. Chen immediately began documenting everything. Time, response, dosage. Every detail. Clean, accurate, undeniable. I didn't speak. I just watched him. Watched the moment he realized he was back. Give him a few minutes, Dr. Chen said quietly. He'll be disoriented. I nodded. I already knew. I stepped back slightly. Gave him space. But didn't leave. Not yet. Because now, this wasn't just about surviving. This was about control. And I wasn't letting that slip. After a minute, his eyes focused. On me. Recognition hit slowly. Then confusion. Then something else. Something deeper. Emily, he said, his voice weak. I'm here, I replied. I kept my tone calm, neutral, controlled. What happened? He asked. I didn't answer directly. Not yet. Instead, I sat down beside him. Folded my hands, looked at him steadily. You're alive, I said. That's what matters right now. He swallowed, still trying to understand. I leaned slightly closer. There's something you need to understand, I added quietly. His eyes stayed on mine. The only reason you're alive, I paused, just long enough, is because I decided you should be. That landed. I saw it in his expression. Something shifted. Not just confusion anymore, something closer to fear. Good. He needed to feel that. Everything that happens next, I continued, depends on me. Silence. He didn't argue, didn't react, just watched me, and slowly, he nodded. That was enough. I stood up. Dr. Chen finished recording the final details. We should move him soon, he said. I know, I replied, but first. There was one more thing. I took out my phone and made a call. Lisa picked up immediately. How is it upstairs? I asked. Complicated, she said. Your father-in-law tried to push the officers to close things quickly. I almost smiled. That was a mistake on his part. They didn't like that, she added. Now they're digging deeper. Good, I said. And Rachel? I asked. There was a brief pause. That's interesting, Lisa replied. She's been trying to speak privately with one of the officers. Of course she had. I already knew why. She's starting to panic, Lisa added. I nodded slightly. Right on schedule. Keep her there, I said. Just a little longer. Understood. I ended the call, then looked back at Daniel one last time. Everything was in place now. The evidence, the timeline, the cracks in their story, and now, him, alive, which changed everything. I turned and walked toward the door. Dr. Chen followed. As we stepped back into the hallway, I felt it clearly. The shift. Before I was reacting. Now, I was in control. When I stepped back into the main floor, everything felt different. Not calmer, just clearer. The noise of the hospital was still there. People moving, voices echoing, everything continuing like nothing had happened. But I wasn't the same person who had walked out earlier. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The officers were still in the hallway. Rachel stood a few steps away from them, trying to keep her composure. My father-in-law remained where I had left him, still standing, still controlled, but not untouched. Something had shifted. I could see it. Lisa noticed me first. Her eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, she understood. No words needed. Dr. Carter, one of the officers said as I approached, we're still reviewing. I know, I said calmly, and I have something to add. That immediately drew attention. Rachel's head turned toward me, fast, too fast. I could see the tension in her face now. It wasn't hidden anymore. I just came from the lower level, I continued. I wanted to verify something before saying anything else. I let that sit for a second. Then I looked directly at my father-in-law. My husband is not dead. Silence. Complete silence. Rachel's expression broke first. Confusion, then disbelief, then something closer to panic. That's not possible, she said quickly. We all saw. No, I cut in calmly. You assumed. I turned slightly toward the officers. The substance in his system didn't act like a normal toxin. The pattern didn't match. I kept my explanation simple, clear, human. It slowed everything down, made it look like his body was shutting down. A pause. But it wasn't final. The officers exchanged a glance. Meaning? One of them asked. Meaning he was put into that state on purpose, I said. Now I let my gaze return to my father-in-law, and whoever planned this knew exactly what they were doing. He didn't respond. Not yet, but I saw it. That small shift again. Less control this time. Rachel took a step forward. That doesn't prove anything, she said quickly. Even if he's alive, she still refused to operate. She still, be careful, I said quietly, not louder, not aggressive, just enough. She stopped, because she heard it, not the words, the tone. You're right about one thing, I continued. I didn't operate. I let the silence stretch. But that's because there was no real emergency to operate on. That hit harder than anything else so far. A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably, because now the situation was changing. This wasn't about a mistake anymore. This was about intention. The officer holding the tablet spoke again. We're going to need full medical confirmation of what you're saying. You'll have it, I replied. The doctor who analyzed the case is documenting everything now. That part was already in motion. Everything was. Rachel looked between me and my father-in-law, and for the first time, she didn't speak, because now she was starting to understand. Not just that things were going wrong, but that she didn't know everything. I stepped a little closer. Not too much, just enough to keep control of the moment. You were very confident earlier, I said quietly to her. You came in with a story already prepared. She didn't answer. You knew about the accusation, I continued. The delay, the blame. A pause. But you didn't know about this part, did you? That landed. Her silence said everything. I turned away from her. Because she wasn't the real problem anymore. Not the main one. My attention shifted back to my father-in-law. 4 weeks ago, I said. You asked for access to restricted records. He remained still. You said it was for internal review. Still nothing. But now we know you used that access to enter my office this morning. The officer nodded slightly, confirming. And now, I added, we also know my husband was given something that made his condition look worse than it really was. I let the connection form on its own. I didn't need to say it directly. Everyone was already thinking it. The officer took a step closer to him. Mr. Hayes, he said, we're going to need you to come with us. This time, there was no immediate response, just a brief pause. Then he nodded. Calm again, but different, like someone who understood the situation had changed. As he adjusted his jacket, he spoke. Emily, he said, his voice lower now, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I didn't react, because that was just another attempt, another shift, another way to regain control. It doesn't have to be like this, he added. I met his gaze. It already is, I replied. That was the end of it. He didn't argue again. The officers guided him away, not forcefully, but firmly. Rachel watched it happen, and I could see it clearly now. She hadn't expected this outcome, not even close. The plan she believed in was collapsing in front of her. I didn't say anything to her, not yet, because I didn't need to. She was already breaking on her own. Lisa stepped closer to me once things settled. You moved faster than I expected, she said quietly. I didn't have a choice, I replied. She gave a small nod. That woman, she added, glancing toward Rachel, she's trying to cooperate now. Of course she was. I exhaled slowly. Everything was aligning. The evidence, the timeline, the pressure, and most importantly, the truth was finally coming out. I looked down the hallway where my father-in-law had disappeared, then back at Rachel, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, not satisfaction, something quieter, control. The hallway slowly returned to its usual rhythm. People went back to work. Conversations resumed, but the tension didn't disappear completely. It lingered, quiet, heavy. Rachel was still standing there, not shouting anymore, not accusing, just still. Watching everything fall apart, Lisa leaned slightly toward me. She's asking to speak to the officers alone, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. That was expected. People like her didn't hold on once things started collapsing. They adjusted, survived, or tried to. Give her a few more minutes, I said, then let them talk. Lisa studied my face for a moment, then nodded. She understood. Timing mattered. Everything about this depended on timing. I walked past Rachel without saying anything, but I could feel her watching me, following me with her eyes, trying to understand how things had turned so quickly. I didn't stop. Not until I reached the observation window near the intermediate care unit. Daniel had already been transferred. Everything was moving exactly as it should. Clean. Controlled. Inside, he was lying in bed, hooked up to monitors. Stable. Alive. A doctor stood nearby, checking his vitals. I stayed where I was. Didn't go in, not yet. A few minutes passed before Lisa joined me again. "They're talking now," she said. "How long?" I asked. "Not sure, but she's saying a lot." Of course she was. "She's trying to shift everything," Lisa added, blaming him, saying she didn't know the full plan. I almost smiled. That confirmed it, exactly what I had seen earlier. "She didn't," I said quietly. Lisa looked at me. "You're sure?" "Yes." I kept my eyes on the room in front of me. She knew enough to act, I continued, but not enough to understand what would happen to her. Lisa crossed her arms slightly. "Then she was used." "Yes." A short pause, and now she knows it. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching, thinking, processing. "Are you going to talk to him?" Lisa asked after a while. I knew who she meant. Daniel. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I had already said everything that mattered. Still, there was one last thing to settle. "Yes," I said finally. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was quiet. Daniel turned his head slightly when he heard me. His eyes focused on me immediately. Still weak, still recovering, but aware. The doctor inside gave me a brief nod and stepped out, closing the door behind him, leaving us alone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I walked over slowly, stopped beside the bed. He watched me the entire time, like he was trying to read something in my face. "Your lawyer came," I said. His expression shifted slightly. "I figured," he replied quietly. "He asked for time," I added. "Medical reasons." Daniel nodded. "That makes sense." Silence again. Then he looked at me more carefully. "Why did you come back?" he asked. His voice was low, not defensive, not aggressive, just uncertain. I studied him for a second, then answered, "Because you're still part of this." That wasn't what he expected. I saw it immediately. "I told you before," I continued. "You being alive changes everything." He swallowed slightly. There was tension in his face now. "You think I'm going to help you?" he asked. "I think you don't have a choice," I said calmly. That landed. I didn't need to push harder. He already understood. "The situation outside," I added, "isn't going the way you planned." His jaw tightened. So he did know, at least part of it. "Your father has been taken in for questioning," I said. That got a reaction. Small, but real. "And Rachel is talking." This time, he went completely still. Because now he understood the position he was in. Not in control, not protected, exposed. I leaned slightly closer. "Everything is already moving," I said quietly. "Records, access logs, medical reports." I paused. "There's no version of this where you walk away clean." He didn't respond, didn't argue, because there was nothing to argue. "Cooperate," I said. "That's your best option." A long silence followed. Then he exhaled slowly. "I didn't think it would go this far," he admitted. I didn't react. "I thought," he hesitated, "I thought it would just work." That was the first honest thing he had said, and it told me everything I needed to know. "You thought you could control everything," I said. He didn't deny it. "I wasn't supposed to wake up like this," he added quietly. "No," I replied. "You weren't." Another silence. Then he looked at me again, more carefully this time. "Are you going to testify?" he asked. "Yes," I said. No hesitation, no doubt. He nodded slowly, like he expected that answer. "Then I'll talk," he said. That was it. That was the moment. The shift. I straightened up. "Good," I replied. I didn't stay longer. There was nothing else to say. As I walked out, I felt it again. That same quiet feeling, everything aligning, everything settling into place. Lisa was waiting outside. "Well?" she asked. "He'll cooperate," I said. She nodded once. "Then it's over." I looked down the hallway, at the officers, at Rachel, at everything that had happened in just a few hours. No, I said calmly. It's just finishing. Things moved quickly after that. Not loudly, not dramatically, just efficiently. Like everything had already been decided, and now it was just a matter of following the steps. Rachel was taken aside officially. No more quiet conversations. No more trying to control the narrative. Now it was statements. Questions. Details. She didn't resist, didn't argue. She talked. A lot. Lisa stayed close enough to hear parts of it. Not everything, but enough. She's giving them timelines, Lisa told me quietly. Calls, messages, meetings. I nodded. That was exactly what I expected. And? I asked. Lisa hesitated slightly. She said Daniel promised her things, she added. Said once everything was done, he would leave you and start over with her. I didn't react. Not on the outside. Inside. It barely registered. That part didn't matter anymore. Did she mention the plan? I asked. Yes, Lisa replied. But not all of it. Of course not. She knew about the accusation, Lisa continued. The setup with the surgery, the blame, a pause. But she didn't know about the substance. That confirmed everything. She thought he was actually dying, Lisa added. I let out a slow breath, so even in that, she had been kept in the dark, used, controlled, just like I suspected. And my father-in-law? I asked. Lisa glanced down the hallway. They're questioning him separately. How is he handling it? A small pause. Still calm, she said, but not like before. I understood what that meant. He wasn't in control anymore, and he knew it. I looked through the glass again. Daniel was still inside, stable, alive. Everything was holding. For now. Lisa shifted slightly beside me. They're going to bring in more people, she said. Internal review, administration. I nodded. That was expected too. This isn't going away quietly, she added. It was never going to, I replied. We stood there for a moment longer. Then I stepped away. There was one more thing I needed to do, something I had been putting off. I walked down the corridor slowly this time, not rushed, not pressured, just focused. Daniel's room was behind me. The officers were busy. Rachel was talking. Everything was in motion, and for the first time since this started, I had space to think. Not about the case, not about the evidence, about something else. 4 years. 4 years of marriage, and I couldn't point to a single moment where I had seen this coming. Not clearly. There were signs, small ones, late nights, missed calls, things that didn't quite add up, but nothing that felt like this, nothing that felt like betrayal at this level. I stopped walking, just for a second, let the thought settle, then let it go, because it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. I reached the administrative office and stepped inside. The head nurse looked up. Dr. Carter, she said. Do you need something? Yes, I replied. My voice was steady. I need to file a formal report. She nodded immediately. Of course. She pulled out the necessary forms, set them in front of me. I sat down, picked up the pen, and started writing. Every detail. Everything that had happened. From the moment the paramedics arrived, to the messages, to the OR, to the evidence. Clear, direct. No emotion, just facts. That's what mattered now. When I finished, I handed it back. The head nurse reviewed it briefly, then looked at me. This will start an official investigation, she said. I know, I replied. She hesitated slightly. Are you sure you want to proceed? I held her gaze. Yes. There was no doubt, no hesitation. She nodded. All right. I'll submit it immediately. I stood up. As I turned to leave, she spoke again. Dr. Carter, for what it's worth, I paused. You handled this well. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because it didn't feel important. Not anymore. I stepped back into the hallway. The hospital felt the same as always. Busy, neutral, unchanged, but everything was different. Because now, everything was exposed. Lisa approached me again. They're moving him, she said. Daniel? She nodded. To a monitored unit, under supervision. Of course, that was the next step. And Rachel? I asked. She signed a preliminary statement. I exhaled slowly. Good. That meant things were progressing faster than expected. Lisa studied me for a moment. You're very calm, she said. I thought about that, then answered honestly. I'm just done reacting. She nodded slightly. She understood, because that's what this was now. Not chaos, not confusion, just process, just consequences. I looked down the hallway one more time, at the officers, at the movement, at everything unfolding, and I realized something simple. They had planned everything carefully, every step, every detail, every outcome, except one thing. They didn't plan for me to stop playing along. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with a strange kind of order. No shouting, no chaos, just people doing what needed to be done, officers moving in and out, staff being questioned, reports being filed. Everything felt controlled, measured. Like the situation had shifted from something emotional into something procedural. Lisa stayed close, but not too close, always nearby, always aware. They've requested full access logs for the past 2 days, she told me quietly. I nodded. Good, that would only make things clearer. And the pharmacy records, she added, that mattered. A lot, because whatever had been used on Daniel didn't come from nowhere. I glanced down the hallway again. They'll find it, I said. Lisa crossed her arms slightly. They already started looking. Of course they had. This wasn't something that could stay hidden for long. Not anymore. A few minutes later, one of the officers approached me again. Dr. Carter, he said, we're going to need your statement recorded officially. I nodded. I'm ready. He led me into a quieter room. Simple. Neutral. Just a table and 2 chairs. Nothing else. I sat down. He turned on a small recorder. Whenever you're ready, he said. I took a breath, then started from the beginning. The night shift, the paramedics, the messages, everything. I kept it simple, clear, no unnecessary details, just what mattered. He didn't interrupt much, only when he needed clarification. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. These messages you saw, he said. You're saying they appeared suddenly? Yes. And you don't know how? No. That part was still unexplained, but right now it didn't matter, because everything else was real, verifiable, documented. He nodded slowly. All right, he said. We'll include it as part of your statement. He turned off the recorder. You can go, he added. I stood up and stepped back into the hallway. Lisa was waiting. They've confirmed something, she said immediately. What? She glanced around briefly before speaking. The substance used on Daniel, part of it came from hospital inventory. That didn't surprise me. But not all of it, she added. I looked at her. Meaning? It was mixed with something else, she said, something not officially logged. I exhaled slowly. So it was even more controlled than we thought. Who had access? I asked. Lisa didn't hesitate. Very few people. I didn't need her to list them. We both already knew. I leaned back slightly against the wall. Everything was connecting now. The access logs, the office entry, the substance, the timing, all of it pointed in the same direction. Lisa watched me for a second. You already knew, didn't you? I gave a small nod. Enough of it. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. That's why I trusted her. A nurse passed by and stopped briefly. Dr. Carter, she said. They've moved him. He's stable. I nodded. Thank you. Stable. That word mattered, because it meant time, and time meant options. Lisa tilted her head slightly. Are you going to see him again? I thought about it, then shook my head. Not right now. There was nothing else to say. Not yet. What needed to happen next didn't depend on me talking to him. It depended on everything else closing in. We stood there for a moment in silence. Then Lisa spoke again. Your father-in-law's lawyer just arrived. I almost smiled. Of course he had, right on time. They're trying to limit what he says, she added. That won't stop anything, I replied. Too much had already been uncovered. Too many pieces were in place. You can slow things down, but you can't stop them once they reach a certain point. Lisa nodded. He's asking to speak with you. That made me pause, just for a second. Why? I asked. She shrugged slightly. He didn't say. I considered it, carefully, then shook my head. Not now. If he wanted control back, he wasn't getting it from me. Lisa didn't argue. All right. The hallway grew quieter as the afternoon stretched on. Shift changes started happening. New staff arriving, others leaving. But the core of everything remained. Unfinished. I checked the time. Hours had passed since the beginning of all this, but it felt like something else entirely. Longer. heavier, more focused. Lisa followed my gaze. "You should get some rest after this," she said. I shook my head. Not yet. There was still too much moving, too many pieces still settling. I couldn't step away yet. Not until everything locked into place, because I knew something important. This wasn't over, not completely. Plans like this don't fall apart all at once. They break in stages, and we were only partway through that process. I pushed myself off the wall and straightened. "Where are you going?" Lisa asked. I glanced down the hallway. "Just making sure there are no loose ends." She studied me for a second, then gave a small nod. "I'll stay here," she said. "Good." I started walking, not rushed, not tense, just steady, because now I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't trying to understand. I already did, and once you understand everything, the only thing left to do is finish it. I didn't go far, just down the corridor, past the quieter wing of the hospital where fewer people passed by. This part of the building always felt different. Less noise, less movement, more space to think. I stopped near a window at the end of the hall. From here I could see the parking lot outside, almost empty now. The sky was starting to darken. Hours had passed. But everything still felt sharp, clear, like my mind refused to slow down. Footsteps approached behind me, measured, controlled. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You should at least hear what I have to say." His voice was calm, careful. I turned slowly. My father-in-law stood a few steps away, an officer nearby but not too close, giving just enough space. He looked the same as always, composed, put together. But now, it felt different, like the image didn't fully hold anymore. "I already heard enough," I said. My voice stayed even. He nodded slightly. "I expected you'd say that." Of course he did. He always expected things. That was part of the problem. He stepped a little closer. Not aggressive, just deliberate. "This situation doesn't need to go any further," he said. I didn't respond. "Think about what happens next," he continued. "Investigations, reports, public attention." He paused. "Your career will be tied to this." I almost smiled. That was his angle. Not denial. Not defense. Control through consequence. "I'm already part of it," I said calmly. "That doesn't mean you have to let it escalate," he replied. I looked at him for a long second, then asked quietly, "Was any of this ever about protecting me?" That question landed differently. He didn't answer immediately. For the first time since this started, he actually hesitated. Just for a moment, but it was enough. "No," I said before he could speak. I didn't need his answer. I already knew it. "This was about control," I continued, "about deciding what happens to me without me knowing." His expression tightened slightly. "Still controlled, but no longer perfect." "You're misunderstanding the situation," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm seeing it clearly." Silence stretched between us. The officer shifted slightly, watching. My father-in-law exhaled slowly, then tried one last time. "Daniel made mistakes," he said, "but that doesn't mean everything needs to fall apart." There it was. The shift. From control to negotiation. But it was too late. "It already has," I said. And this time, I didn't wait. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, because there was nothing left to hear, nothing left to consider. Whatever he thought he could fix was already broken. When I returned to the main floor, things had progressed further. Rachel was no longer in the hallway. "Where is she?" I asked Lisa. "With the officers," she replied. "Formal statement." I nodded. "And him?" Lisa glanced in the direction I had just come from. "Still here, for now." I didn't say anything, because I already knew that wouldn't last. Lisa studied my face for a moment. "He talked to you, didn't he?" "Yes." "And?" I shook my head. "It doesn't matter." She didn't press. That's why she was still here, why I trusted her. A nurse passed by again. "They're preparing documents for transfer," she said. "For him." "Daniel." I nodded. "Good." Everything was moving forward, step by step, exactly the way it should. Lisa crossed her arms lightly. "You know this won't end today," she said. "I know." There were still procedures, statements, decisions that would take time, but the direction, that was already set. I looked down the hallway one more time, at the movement, at the people, at everything returning to normal, or at least something close to it. Then I spoke quietly. They built something complicated, I said. Lisa nodded. Yes, I looked at her. But they made one mistake. She waited. They assumed I wouldn't see it in time. A small pause. And once I did, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. She understood. Lisa gave a small, knowing nod. Yeah, she said softly. I think they did. We stood there for a moment longer. Then I checked the time again. The shift was almost over. But it didn't feel like an ending. Not really. More like a transition. From reaction to resolution. I picked up my bag. Leaving? Lisa asked. Soon. Not yet, but soon. Because there was one last thing I needed to do. Not for the case. Not for the investigation. For myself. I took a slow breath, then started walking again, this time toward the exit. Each step felt lighter, not easy, but certain, because everything that needed to happen already had. I didn't go straight to the exit. Instead, I stopped halfway, right outside Daniel's room. The door was slightly open. I could hear quiet movement inside. Monitors, footsteps. Normal sounds. I stood there for a few seconds, not unsure, just deciding. Then I pushed the door open and stepped in. He turned his head almost immediately, like he was expecting me, or hoping I would come back. The room was dimmer now, quieter than before, more controlled. He looked better, still weak, but fully conscious, aware. Emily, he said. My name sounded different now. Not familiar, not comforting, just something he used. I didn't respond right away. I walked in slowly and stopped at the same spot as before. A few steps from the bed, not closer, not distant either. Neutral. They're building the case, I said. My voice was calm, flat. He nodded slightly. I know. Rachel is talking, I added. His jaw tightened. Yeah, I figured she would. No surprise there, no denial. That told me more than any explanation could. And your father? I continued. This time, he didn't answer immediately. They're not going to let him control this, I said. A pause. They're not going to let you control it either. That landed. I saw it in his expression. Not anger, not even frustration, just the realization settling in. You planned everything, I said. Carefully, he let out a slow breath. We thought we did. We. Not just him, not just Rachel. All of them. And you didn't expect me to see it, I added. No, he admitted. That was honest. Probably the most honest he'd been all day. I nodded once. Of course you didn't. Silence filled the room again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was final. There wasn't much left to say. Still, he looked at me again. More carefully this time. There's something I don't understand, he said. I waited. Why didn't you just walk away? He asked. When you saw it? When you realized what was happening? A small pause. You could have left everything behind. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it showed how little he understood. I didn't need to run, I said. My voice stayed steady. I just needed to stop playing the role you planned for me. He didn't respond, because there was nothing to say to that. I continued. You expected me to react, to panic, to follow the situation you created. A brief pause. But once I stopped doing that, I let the sentence hang. He nodded slowly. Everything fell apart. Yes, I said. Exactly that. Everything fell apart, because control only works when the other person follows the script. I stepped back slightly. That was enough. There was no reason to stay longer. Your lawyer is right, I added. Cooperate. He looked at me. Will it make a difference? He asked. I held his gaze. Yes, I said, then a short pause. But not the kind you're hoping for. That was the truth. I turned and walked toward the door. Emily, he called. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I did care about you, he said. There was something in his voice. Something almost real. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. At that point, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't respond. I just opened the door and walked out. The hallway felt quieter now, like everything had settled into place. Lisa was still there, waiting. How did it go? She asked. Exactly how it needed to, I replied. She studied my face, then nodded. Then it's really over. I looked down the hallway, at the empty spaces, at the normal movement returning. at everything continuing. Yes, I said quietly. It is. I finally made my way to the exit. This time, I didn't stop. The doors opened automatically. Cool air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. The sky was darker now, almost night. The parking lot was nearly empty. I stood there for a second, just breathing, not thinking, not analyzing, just existing. For the first time since this started, there was nothing urgent left. Nothing chasing me, nothing waiting to happen next. Everything had already happened. I walked to my car slowly, unlocked it, sat down, closed the door. The silence inside felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just quiet. I placed my hands on the steering wheel, and for a moment, I let everything settle. Then I started the engine and drove away. The next few days passed in a way that felt structured. Everything moved forward, not fast, but steady. Reports were filed, statements were reviewed, more people were questioned, and little by little, everything became clearer. Rachel gave a full account, not immediately, but eventually. She confirmed the plan, the setup, the intention to shift blame onto me. She admitted what she knew, and more importantly, what she didn't, which mattered just as much, because it proved something I had already figured out. She wasn't the one in control. She never was. My father-in-law held his position longer, careful with his words, measured. But pressure has a way of breaking even the most controlled people, especially when everything around them starts closing in. The access logs, the records, the inconsistencies, all of it pointed back to him, step by step. There was no single moment where everything collapsed, just a gradual loss of ground, until there was nowhere left to stand. Daniel cooperated, just like he said he would, not out of loyalty, not out of regret, but because he understood the situation. He explained his role, the planning, the timing, what he was supposed to do, what he believed would happen, and how it all depended on one thing: me. Reacting exactly the way they expected, following the path they built, making the decisions they needed me to make. That was the core of everything. And once that failed, the rest didn't hold. The hospital conducted its own review, formal, detailed. They went through everything: my actions, my decisions, my timing, every step I took that night, and in the end, there was nothing to hold against me. No misconduct, no negligence, no violation, just a situation I refused to walk into blindly. Lisa told me the result in person. "They cleared you?" she said simply. I nodded. "I expected that." She gave a small smile. "I know. The legal process would take longer. Of course it would. Things like this always do. But the direction was already set. There was no version of this where the truth stayed hidden. Not anymore. I didn't go back to work immediately. Just a few days. Nothing dramatic. Just enough time to reset, to step away from everything that had happened, to let my mind catch up with reality. On my first day back, everything looked the same. Same halls, same rooms, same people. The hospital doesn't stop. It doesn't change for anyone. And in a way, that helped, because it reminded me of something simple. Life continues, no matter what. Lisa found me halfway through the shift. "You good?" she asked. I considered the question, then nodded. Yes, and this time, I meant it. I walked through the corridors like I always had, calm, focused, present. No distractions, no hesitation, because something had changed. Not around me, in me. I didn't second-guess things anymore, didn't ignore small details, didn't assume things were fine just because they looked that way. I paid attention to everything. Later that day, I passed by the same window at the end of the hall, the one overlooking the parking lot. I stopped for a moment, just like before. But it felt different now, quieter, lighter. There was no weight behind it anymore. No tension, no uncertainty, just a memory of a moment where everything could have gone wrong and didn't. I didn't stay there long. There was no reason to. I turned and walked back to work, back to routine, back to something real, because in the end, that's what mattered. Not what they planned, not what they expected, but what I chose to do, and I chose not to follow their story.